Hello, and welcome to a video reviewing and chatting about Legend of Exorcism Volume 4. I really loved how this volume further developed information we got in the last volume about things like Longjun's past, and also developing Longjun's relationship, and things with Lushu and Mergen, and lore on Xie. And I wanted to share my thoughts about the volume, and I would love to hear your thoughts if you want to put them in the comments below. This volume starts not with the exorcists, but with what is quite a loaded interaction between Yang Yuhuan and Yang Guozhong, who are discussing the way that public's opinion of their family has kind of changed negatively, and also Yang Guozhong is kind of talking about Li Jinglong and the Department of Exorcists, and kind of planting that seed in Yang Yuhuan's mind that maybe they are not great and they need to try and get rid of the department, which sets up quite a lot of stuff for this volume. And it was interesting looking back at that scene, knowing that Yang Guozhong is Xie, especially because I just realized when I was looking at it that Yang Yuhuan says that like the public now thinks that all of their family is like monsters or Yao, which is kind of ironic now, knowing that actually she might be the only prominent figure of their family who isn't a Yao, I guess. When I was reading it, it did make me think that there was probably more than meets the eye with Yang Guozhong, because of the way that like he was talking about the Department of Exorcism. It all felt very calculated to like start to stir up trouble. I've just noticed that it's mentioned that Yang Guozhong is fiddling with a hourglass, and at the end of this book Yuan Kun mentions that Xie has the power to do stuff with time. And I don't know, hourglass, time, that might be mentioned more directly later in the volume and I've just forgotten it, but yeah, that's interesting. That is one thing I love about the series, is that when you look back over bits, I always see more things and things that I haven't spotted before, and I'm like, hold on a second. I can't wait for when the full series is out to go back and read it from the beginning, because I feel like there are going to be so many bits where I'm like, hold on a second, hold on, the whole time? What do you mean? So that's going to be fun. After that scene, we switch back to quite a domestic kind of setting, with the exorcists getting back into the rhythm of their daily life now that they're all back in the capital, and Longjun and Lushu being the only ones left at the department together and the shenanigans that throws up. And I just loved that domesticity of that scene. I think that's one thing that I just adore about Legend of Exorcism, is how many lovely domestic chill moments there are between, whether it's between the couples or just between friends, in between the lore and the trauma and the mystery and everything else that is going on. There are some really atmospheric moments, and I think those are quite often the ones that I remember and that I go back to because they just make me happy. I found it very funny that Longjun was expecting like the other exorcists to ask questions about his relationship with Li Jinglong, or the way things have changed, but all of them just take it in their stride. I don't know, it's just funny to me that he has not noticed that the entire department has been hardcore shipping them from day one. I mean, I was thinking recently about how ridiculous a first meeting with Li Jinglong, Mergen, Atai, and Chiyongsa have. Like, this guy crashes into the department and yells, "Give me back my virtue," at Longjun. I really want to know what they thought was happening and what the context for that situation was. Because I bet they were a bit surprised when they found out that Li Jinglong and Longjun didn't really know each other, despite that interaction. Longjun and Lushu end up having to field 2 separate visits from officials, which goes so ridiculously. I love Longjun and Lushu's dynamic together and how sassy they are in this scene. Just having Longjun being like, how am I not an adult, I'm 17, which is also the first time we've heard him say he's 17. When was his birthday? When did he turn 17? Last time I checked, it's been mentioned many times that this kid is 16 years old. I mean, at least his age is weird, as is proved here. When Lu Shu is like, yeah, I'm 18, he's my older brother. Oh, they are comic gold together. We also get Li Jinglong's new title, the Marquis of Yardang, introduced here, which was funny hearing him be called something other than like chief for this volume. I guess it's something I need to get used to apparently. The second visit is from Huang Yong, who is a character I don't think we've really seen much of. Have we seen him before? I'm not remembering properly. But it was interesting, he pops up a few times in this volume and I was quite impressed as like a lot of the officials, it seems like, turn their noses up at the Department of Exorcism, but he communicated quite levelly with them, especially with Longjun and Lu Shu, who are kind of this isn't what they've been trained to do. They know how to like hunt and fight Yao. They do not know how to handle diplomacy and meetings with official people at all. And you really see how they don't really know how to handle the situation with them trying to work out what to do about this case they've been given. They have a great dynamic and get on really well together, but they do have some of the same weaknesses in a way, I would say. And you do really see that with how they do get themselves into trouble, with the fact that they don't properly look at the information surrounding the case and do the proper investigating like they would normally do on a case that Li Jinglong was leading. They kind of just charge in. They do try and get an idea of things, and through that you see Lu Shu using some of his powers, which was really interesting. We haven't seen that before, which allows him to see lingering ghosts and see that there aren't any lingering ghosts around where they are. I was not expecting Xie Yu to show up so soon, and it really threw me to have him just in the mausoleum, just chilling as a massive snake. I had expected there to be a lot more build up to some kind of battle or something happening, and not just him showing up in what is quite a short interaction, but that does give us a lot of information. The main bit being that the heart lamp has sealed and protected Longjun from Xie Yu, which puts for me quite a different spin on the sort of, in some ways, kind of urgency around Li Jinglong and Longjun kind of getting together in the last chapter of two chapters of the last volume, volume 3. Because when I was reading that scene, I did feel like it was kind of, I don't know, slightly rushed in some ways. Like, it felt like Longjun was still getting very much used to all of this, and I felt like in some ways I was slightly surprised by Li Jinglong's kind of certainty with that, but it makes a lot more sense to me now, knowing that part of the reasoning behind that was very strategic and very important, in that it was important for them to be together, for Li Jinglong to be able to help Longjun with being able to resist Xie Yu and to seal his heart, because that's what the Ghost King mentioned, you know, could do with Lu Shu, but you needed to be able to feel all the things towards him and stuff, which was, oh, that was a scene, which Li Jinglong of course could not do with Lu Shu, but with Longjun, very different matter. I did love, I know it's kind of a cliche, but Li Jinglong and Morgan just showing up to protect their boyfriends. Like, that was really sweet. And then how upset and worried Li Jinglong is afterwards, which I feel like he has a complete right to be. Like, Longjun just went off on a case that he didn't really know how to handle. And I was kind of, I don't know, it's just me. I was quite impressed with Li Jinglong. Like, I was quite impressed with Li Jinglong's kind of understanding of Longjun, and how he managed his feelings and his fear towards all of that. And we get to see Longjun kissing for the first time in this volume, and there's an illustration, and I love it. I love how affectionate they are with each other. Mostly that's initiated by Li Jinglong in the first half of the book, but it made me so happy seeing that and seeing in the second half of the book, after the flashback, how Longjun just like is also very immediate with that and really like starts that and reciprocates that. It made me so happy, and I think that's one thing I love about the fact that they got together so early in the series, is that we're gonna get 4 books. I know so much stuff is gonna happen. I know there is gonna be angst. We got 4 books of these guys being together and being chaotic, romantic little freaks together. I'm so excited. The next scene is what is the first of quite a few actually meeting scenes in this volume. The Exorcist ends up regrouping a lot over the course of the volume, usually to discuss new information, stuff that's gone wrong, etc. And I do love how much that is a rhythm in Legend of Exorcism, of regrouping to discuss new information and find a way forwards, despite how much Li Jinglong does tend to compartmentalize information in a way that frustrates me. It is nice to see that they do always come back to discussing things as a group. And I think that gives them a lot of strength when moving forwards, because they have discussed everything and are generally on a similar page. In this scene, you also see a bit of Turandot, Atai's fiancée, who I really wish was more present in this volume. You see glimpses of her, usually related to when the gang is at Lanling Amber for meetings or food or whatever is happening, or because the department has been shut down. And it was nice to kind of get to see a bit more of her, but I really want to know more about her and Atai's backstory, because we didn't really get that cleared up last volume. And also just like as like a character, she is so far one of the few female characters in the story, and like I know it's probably not going to be more focus on her, but I'm manifesting that. She's pretty cool. She has a whip and she started a tavern, and I want to know what's going on with her. There was a lot of mystery in this volume because the group didn't really know who the players were in a lot of what was happening for quite a lot of the volume. It was only quite late on in the volume that they realized everything. With the new character and the new villain we have of An Lushan. And with Yang Guozhong being Xie Yu, and also with stuff with Qingzhong and Yuan Kun, and like the various different players in the situation. And a lot of this volume was the Exorcist trying to work out who is doing what and who is moving what pieces on this interdimensional chessboard. This is the first scene, I think, when Li Jinglong suggests the possibility that Xie Yu could be like a well-known member of the court and very close to the emperor, which again is true and goes to play a lot of the rest of the story. After the meeting is finished up, you again get to see Li Jinglong and Longjun together, which I found a really interesting scene. I love the dynamics between them and I find it very interesting. I really love the way Fei Tian wrote all of Longjun's feelings about how new him being with Li Jinglong, being with anyone romantically and sexually is. Because they felt so real to me, and I feel like real weight was given to them. It wasn't like, oh, you know, he's just like naive, he just doesn't know this stuff. It's like, it was really broken down what he is feeling and why he is feeling it, because this is all very new and he doesn't know how to react to this and how to deal with it in a lot of ways, which is very different from Li Jinglong, who is a lot more comfortable in himself in this way. Probably for a lot of reasons. I think probably growing up not as sheltered, and also just the fact that he is older, and probably also partly, I don't know, temperament in Li Jinglong's general shamelessness, which we get to see on full view in this volume, and which also surprised me. The switch between his very, very generally professional facade when he is around the other exorcists and when he is communicating with officials, the emperor, whoever, and then how he behaves when it's just him and Longjun. is such a switch, and I love that contrast and that dichotomy. When I was reading this scene, I did wish that Lee Jing-long gave like Longjun a bit more space again. Because Longjun he's like, I'm still getting the hang of this. Give me a minute. And Lee Jing-long is a bit more impatient with things. But I was really happy with how that dynamic changed kind of in the book as Longjun kind of got more confident, and by the end of the book especially, you see that a lot of his reservations around Lee Jing-long actually stem from all of the information he got in the flashback, which is completely fair, honestly. Like, just take a second to talk about the fact that when Longjun discovered the parts of his memories he already has at the beginning of this book, he learned that, you know, Lee Jing-long was in some ways responsible for his parents' death. Also, the trial of Exorcism was where he nearly got killed and they died. That's not mentioned his kind of emotions going back there from that perspective, because I don't know whether it's just not something that bothers him or if it does, because that's a really big thing to be just living and have so many positive memories in this place that you've also now just found out you nearly died in, and your parents did die in. That's crazy. I think it also surprised me how naturally like Lee Jing-long's dirty talk is just kind of thrown in there. I think I'm quite used to stories where kind of sexuality and sex in that way is either like it's kind of at the end of the story, or like kind of a reward for getting through all of the action, all the plot and everything, or it's kind of like stigmatized. I don't know. So I kind of found it refreshing the way also surprising the way Lee Jing-long is just suddenly there to read, and was just suddenly like, won't you touch me? It's like, okay, damn, we're here already. But I kind of like that aspect of Legend of Exorcism, and I find the way that being like sexuality and being queer is portrayed generally really interesting, because you see parts of stigmatization towards it, but there also isn't like a big, like, it's not illegal and it is present in the society, although you do see kind of bits of stigmatization towards it, which is addressed later in this book, and I will talk about then. But I feel like there's a lot of queer joy in the way, I found a lot of queer joy in the way that there isn't as much stigmatization as is in a lot of stories or in a lot of time periods, places in the world, including modern day now. There just feels something very freeing to read a book that is historically set, but that has queer characters being queer. Yeah. We get to see Yuan-kun briefly in the middle of this scene, coming in while the two of them are asleep in each other's arms, which is so cute. And putting Lee Jing-long into like a dream kind of thing. Quite a traumatic dream, which he don't think he remembers, does he? Where it seems like Chang'an is like burning and Longjun has lost control of his demonic self, and Lee Jing-long uses that incantation, that damn poetry incantation, to help him deal with all of that. That snippet of a scene also gives context for why Yuan-kun is injured, as we see in the later parts of the book, and kind of sets up for that part of the story. But we don't really get context for what he did or why he did it. I loved seeing Lee Jing-long and Longjun waking up together, and just the wholesomeness of that, and then the turn that scene quickly takes with the humor of it, but also, I don't know, the realness of it, with Longjun just fully shoving his hand down Lee Jing-long's underwear, semi by accident. And you do see how into it he is, by the way, that he panics, but he does not withdraw his hand. His hand stays firmly where it is. This is one of the parts in the book where my original rough notes just read, ah, in all caps because I didn't know how to describe all of my feelings for this. I love the physicality and the exploration of that scene of them starting to get used to each other's bodies, and the way it described like Longjun's pleasure, and he's not used to this pleasure. Like, I don't know, it felt very real. And again, I think that's the thing, is like, sex is so stigmatized, especially queer sex, that seeing these characters, you know, being sexually intimate with each other, but also just like navigating the various very human aspects of that. Whether it's like Longjun's kind of embarrassment and waking up and being like, oh my gosh, why has this happened again? Or like the intrigue of that, or even just like the practical logistics of Longjun being like, I'm physically uncomfortable because my underwear is wet. Seeing that brought me a lot of joy in just how natural that felt. And also, I don't know, I feel like it can be hard to write smut in a way that is, I don't know, feels compelling to read. I'm not sure. I don't know. I spend way too much time on AO3 to say that. Anyway. But I really loved the way Fei Tian wrote that throughout the course of this volume. That part of the scene is rudely brought to an end when Atai is like coming upstairs. And the fact like he is loudly announcing his presence because he knows that they're together. I love that. And Longjun just like quickly changed out of his underwear, and again, I don't know, those little details of like, I don't know, it makes it feel so much more immersive to me, the story in general. We get to see a bit more of Longjun being cute together before we have to get back to plot stuff, which was really sweet. And again, the way Fei Tian describes food, like, damn, I want to eat this food. I want to eat this food so bad. It's like, that's delicious. I want to sit in a sunny market on a nice morning eating this food. That sounds great. We truly get to see how damn bad for each other they are again, with Li Jinglong reacting to Longjun just smiling at him. He's just smiling. He's just enjoying his breakfast. It's all it takes. And the joke Li Jinglong makes that it takes Longjun a while to get. It was nice seeing them returning to the Chen family home to check in on how they're doing. I thought that was really sweet, the fact that Li Jinglong still remembers to do that, and also the conversation that the two of them have afterwards about the Heart Lamp and about destiny is very interesting, especially in the context of, you know, finding out the way kind of destiny works from Yuan Kun at like the end of the book, and the fact that, you know, the crazy coincidences that do happen are a bit more than coincidences a lot of the time, which isn't much of a surprise, but it also is. Awaiting them back at the department is Yang Guozhong, who is not particularly happy, especially when Li Jinglong excuses himself to go and change clothes, to have an excuse to try and gather himself together in preparation for a diplomatic discussion, which is probably going to be quite fraught, which it is. I love seeing how Li Jinglong deals with diplomacy and being put on the spot and how stubborn he is. I feel like he's really good at that, and it's nice getting to see him do that. This scene kind of really starts to escalate everything going on with the mausoleums, because they have another case and more people dead, which isn't good. Before they set out on the case, there's another scene regrouping and sharing information, including information about stuff about Longjun and the Demon Seed, which was interesting, again touching on that theme of Longjun feeling left out because people aren't communicating with him. And I do find it interesting the way that the Department of Exorcism feels in some ways so clear with each other, but in other ways so many of them have so many secrets and and really compartmentalize information and don't share information for a variety of reasons which are usually pretty relatable and make a lot of sense. Judging by the high stakes situations they are quite often in, but some of the time I do think it'd be a lot more useful if they did just share things more. Halfway through the scene, Chu Young-soo arrives back from Loyang, which was really nice to see him back, and it's really sweet that Longjun we're saying now that everyone's back, it feels like nothing is missing. That's really, really sweet. I love how wholesome that is. There follows a really interesting discussion about who Yu might be, if he is someone in the court, and also with information coming in from Chu Young-soo about stuff he found out while he was in Loyang. And I really loved the way that Fei Tian writes those big group scenes, because when I was reading it, I was never in doubt of who was talking, which, considering there are like 7, 8 people talking. Hold on, we're counting. 5 exorcists, Zhao Zilong, Lu Shu, Ashina Adavan. That's 8. 8 people talking. Oh, what is this, Lord of the Rings? Is quite big. That's quite a big scene to be able to write so many perspectives and so many different voices, all adding in information and lack of information. And I really enjoy reading those. You get to see Li Jinglong, Longjun, and Ashina Adavan investigating what has been happening at the next mausoleum and what's going on there. And I found it interesting seeing how quickly Li Jinglong clocked the situation and how it was a comparatively short scene, to be honest. But within that there was so much with getting more information on what is going on with the stuff with the mausoleums, but also things with Hongjun's jealousy. Seeing Li Jinglong interacting familiarly with another man who he doesn't know and who Li Jinglong knew before they met for the second time in their lives, which is something that is picked up in the next scene, which I found very interesting. Cheng Shao also doesn't believe that Yao exists until they pull out Zhao Zilong, who is very obviously not in any way, shape or form human apart from his 2 hairy legs. Which is interesting then, because the only other time you see him in this book is when he is kind of testifying against the Department of Exorcism and Li Jinglong to the Emperor, which is kind of sad because he seemed fairly chill, sort of, when they met up at the mausoleum. I found it really funny that the Department of Exorcism is next to the Department of Rural Land Allocation. I want to know what it is like working at the Department of Rural Land Allocation. Can you imagine? I don't know, just the irony of the most mundane department ever being next to the Department of Literal Exorcism is so funny. But I want to know what the Department of Rural Land Allocation hears the Department of Exorcism. Just like someone just staying up late and hearing just the randomest, most unhinged conversations from the idiots next door. Oh, I don't know. I need the story of someone who works at the Rural Land Allocation and decides that they're going to be an exorcist. I need that story. You get to see Li Jinglong and Hongjun having another quite interesting conversation on top of Duke D's cenotaph, which is such an unhinged thing. The fireflies make it kind of cuter, but still, time and place. They start by discussing things about the cases, but it quite quickly gets derailed once Li Jinglong picks up on Hongjun's slight animosity towards Cheng Zhao, because he's jealous. Li Jinglong says, "Why don't you get a little angrier?" Which makes me really intrigued as to what would happen if Hongjun did get angrier. I feel like Li Jinglong really wants that, doesn't he? He really wants for Hongjun to tease back. Oh, and I love that. He is such a brat. You get quite a lot of lore on Li Jinglong in this scene, from the fact that he used to come when the royal family visited the mausoleums, and he would like bring Duke D's artifacts like back to the mausoleums, to also then moving on learning about when he realized that he was gay. You know, I wasn't expecting that to be part of the conversation. That kind of gets instigated from Li Jinglong saying that his type is the pretty dumb ones. Which made me mad reading it, because Longjun is not dumb at all. And I feel like you start to see him realise that about himself in this volume. And I feel like if Longjun wasn't already self-conscious about that, I wouldn't have minded leading along saying it. But as he is, I'm like, dude, come on. Seriously? Did really, you're going there? But it was really interesting seeing Lee Jin-long directly addressing, you know, when he realised his sexuality. And he doesn't really go into sort of how that affected his relationship with being a part of the Guard. But you do kind of get a bit of that in the previous volume with Chin Woo, and seeing how he was ostracized for being framed for something that he, you know, someone make a claim against something about something he didn't do in any way, shape or form. And then you get a really sweet bit of leading along just being really sappy about being in love with Longjun and being in love with him since they first met. And Longjun has such a different context for that, because he knows that that wasn't the first time they met. They met a long time before that. And so that's interesting to read. And Lee Jin-long calls Longjun my prince. That's just... And the illustration of them with the fireflies. Casually having a great conversation in the mausoleum. Then the conversation gets brought back around the plot through Yao factions, and you can see that the cogs are whirring in Lee Jin-long's brain as he's starting to realise that there might be different factions involved in what is happening. We then get to see the Yaogwai that Lee Jin-long and Longjun have been waiting for, and see the two of them continuing on the thought process and starting to flesh out more of that theory now they have more information about these Yao and the different factions that might be going on here, which is quite a big development. There has been a lot of questioning throughout the book about who's at work doing what. Whether it was at the beginning of the story when they were figuring out, you know, who the Yao King of Chang'an was, and that it wasn't Xie Yu, but no, it was Xie Yu. I don't know. He was in the shadows. They weren't aware of that. Or when they were finding out everything with the Ghost King, you know, there's been a lot of questions about who's working with who and to do what. And the X's are generally in the dark about a lot of it and trying to figure it out, which I think is one thing I enjoy about the series. Once our couple exit the mausoleum, they get the information that Morgan was hurt in a fight and is back at the Department of Exorcism. Which then leads us into a situation a bit in contrast from the progress that has been made with Longjun and Lee Jin-long's relationship, where we get to see the rockiness still of Morgan and Lu Shu's relationship, which is generally a really interesting foil to the main ship, and I do really love the dynamic. I find it very interesting to watch. I'm really excited to see how it develops, and while it hasn't been particularly on them this volume, it is more towards the end of the volume, which I really enjoyed, and it kind of starts with this scene in some ways where you're really seeing how kind of at odds they are with each other. And I did realize how perfect a foil they are in the way that Lee Jin-long and Longjun have powers that mean that they are one is destined to destroy the other, but they are very much in love with each other, whereas Morgan and Lu Shu have powers that are supposed to mean they're meant to be together, but their relationship is a lot more rocky right now. We get the context for their argument and also Morgan getting injured, which was that Morgan kind of did not tell Lu Shu the whole plan, and Lu Shu rushed in to protect Morgan because he thought Morgan was in danger when Morgan was not in danger. Communication is not communicating. And I think that sort of really highlighted for me how I think everything about Lu Shu right now kind of challenges Morgan in different ways and challenges his kind of preconception of what his role is. because of so much with like their history and kind of what is, you know, destined about them. And I found it really interesting seeing those emotions coming out from both of them, of how upset they both were with each other and how betrayed they each felt by the other. Li Long shuts down the argument between Mergen and Lu Shu kind of quite comprehensively, and it is interesting, there's a bit noted there that since the beginning of the department, he's pretty chill. He hasn't really reprimanded any of his colleagues or subordinates in any way, and that when he says Lu Shu, that's enough, that's the first time he's picked out, kind of singled out one of them in that way. Like, he's told people to be quiet or stop talking before various times, but that is the first time he has done that in that way. And I do think it would be useful if he kind of had given Lu Shu and Mergen more space to talk things out between each other, but I also see how that wasn't really possible in that situation because of the high stakes things happening on around them. And I was quite impressed how Li Long kind of like brought the group back to like what's important and what's happening right now, rather than like harping on the past and everything. And he like does say, our mission's success depends on all of us working together and trusting each other. We've alerted the enemy, but what's done is done. What use is there in arguing about whose fault it was? Like, I find Li Long's leadership very interesting in general, because I think that he does try very hard and he does exemplify some leadership skills that I try to use when I am in situations when I'm leading. And I really love seeing that portrayed in a character. I feel like quite often leaders in well, in a lot of situations, but in fiction are quite often I don't know, dysfunctional? I don't know. But Li Long feels that he knows how to lead, and it's also something that he clearly enjoys doing, and I really love to see that. Now that the group is regathered again, there's another meeting scene to discuss all the information that they've got from their mission today, and to again continue furthering their theory that there are different factions involved, and that and now that the Yao that they saw today were looking for something and gathering something, and they are not working with Xie Yu, which is interesting that we now have multiple factions going on. When the rest of the gang go out to visit one of the mausoleums, you get a really interesting scene with Longjun and Mergen, which I really loved, mainly because it's just talking through feelings. That's a lot of what I'm here for, is these characters and their feelings. But I found it really interesting how Longjun did not spare Mergen's feelings and his delusions. He was just straight up like, yeah, Lu Shu is easy to get on with. I think that you don't really like him, but he likes you. And Mergen wasn't really ready to hear that. And again, I think going back to what I said about the way that I think Lu Shu really challenges Mergen, like we see later on in this volume, with the flashbacks to Mergen's childhood in two separate scenes that both have to do with Lu Shu, that his childhood bits we see wasn't great. The scenes we see involve the death of his mother and also him being mistreated and abused by his father's family. And also really that gave more weight to me, to how much it means to him for this idea of finding the white deer, because all of his whole life he has been through a lot of suffering and he has really stood out because he is the big wolf, you know, and that hasn't been easy, and finding the white deer is something that he was doing to complete his destiny and maybe find someone who, I don't know, who would understand that part of him. Safety in that, right? The safety and the certainty. And there's possibly a home in that. You know, he had such specific dreams of what his life with the white deer would be like. And it was not like this. Oh. And I think having that context, more context for his childhood, which I think we'll get more in the next volume as well, really helped me understand him as a character and love him even more as a character. And I really love in general how much time Fei Tian has for the, I guess, like, oh, they're not side characters, are they? Like, the characters that aren't the main couple, you know? I really love how fleshed out they are and how much we get to explore their backstories, their dreams, their desires, all the fucked up shit that's happened to them. One of the things that Morgan is struggling with is the fact that he just isn't attracted to Lu Xu and isn't attracted to men in general, which is really interesting having him talking about that after just like a few scenes before, Li Jinglong talking about realizing that he was only attracted to men when he was like 12, 13, I think it's mentioned. So it's really interesting seeing that big contrast between them as characters, and that conversation kind of gives Longjun more information because it's mentioned that he hasn't really ever thought about that conflict of not being attracted to someone who you're sort of meant to be, because as I think he puts it, when he's around Li Jinglong, his body just naturally reacts. And it was so pathetic and hilarious to me reading Morgan just like having a full-on crisis about this, and the fact that he tried to ask Sheena Adavan about it and got a very unhelpful and also kind of dubious answer. Like, what the heck? What kind of an answer was that? About how to fix his love life problems, but also the fact that having him explain that and that Sheena Adavan's solution was for him to tie himself up. Longjun starts imagining Li Jinglong in that position. And fully gets aroused by it. It was just so funny to me, especially, okay, spoiler for the infamous extra. If you don't want to hear the spoiler, skip ahead to whatever the time code is on the screen. I should stop playing with things in my hands that jingle. If you, in the, what's the actual name of the extra? I just know it's the hairpin extra. It's a festival extra, and that extra, we do get to see Li Jinglong tied up, and presenting himself to Longjun in that way, and Longjun is there for it. So I kind of loved that like little bit of foreshadowing. We pick up the next morning with the rest of the gang still not having got back, and Longjun and Morgan going out into the city to work out what all the kerfuffle is about, because they can hear a lot of people. And here we have the introduction of a new character and a new, seems like a pretty major villain in the story, of An Lushan, who has just arrived in the city. And we also get to see two characters who we haven't seen in a while in the shape of Li Guinian and Feng Changqing. There's quite a lot of descriptions around the procession and also around sort of this new character that we are being introduced to and that we sort of get to know more about towards the end of the volume, as we do discover that he is the head of this new faction that we are now seeing come into play. And it's funny because we've been hearing his name on and off. He's been mentioned on and off at different points of the story by different characters, and also at the beginning of book 1, I think it's mentioned that this story is set around the time of the An Lushan rebellion, which kind of sets up like he is going to become more of a character at some point. And I already hated him before we'd met him from a different story, which is Iron Widow, which is a story which is like a sci-fi reimagining of some of Wu Zetian's story, which is interesting because she also gets mentioned in this book, which is funky because I ended up reading them around the same time, starting both series around the same time, which highly recommend as a book and as a series. I still need to read the second book. But anyway, so I hated him before he'd even shown up. But once he'd shown up, I hated him even more. I hated him before he'd shown up from the way he is portrayed in that book. But once he showed up, I hated him even more than I already did. Because, my gosh, it's really interesting to me the space he takes up as a new villain, because I feel like a lot of this book was giving more context and nuance to our perception of characters like Xie and also Chongming and Xingzhong, because in the last book there was a kind of the massive reveal around Hongjun's backstory, and especially the latter two I viewed a lot more negatively because of that. And in this book we do get a lot more nuance with seeing Hongjun going back into his memories with Lu Shu, and getting more information for Xie Yu as well, that kind of, you know, he's still very much a villain, but there is more of a grey area kind of around his relationship with Kong Xuan and everything around that. And now you have this new villain coming in who it feels like you're very much supposed to hate. I found it very hard reading about An Lushan's specific kind of villainy because of how relevant it feels and because of how Fei Tian really wrote and leaned into it. You know, it was quite descriptive to read, and also just because how relevant it feels. You know, I'm filming this in March of 2026. This year has been crazy so far, and with the information that has been coming out and I've been more aware of about the actions of the pedophilic elite that run the world, reading about the kind of especially sexual crimes that An Lushan commits and his very violent nature was really difficult, I found. Partway through the procession, the rest of the gang show up again, and there's a bit of an interaction with them starting to work out that the money that's being thrown out isn't real money, and that the four people following An Lushan are probably the four Yaguai that they have been identifying in the mausoleums and things. So that's quite a big breakthrough. And after that, we have yet another meeting scene of them piecing that together and really starting to work out what's happening. At the end of which, Li Jinglong falls asleep, which is so cute. He deserves a break. The chief deserves a break. After everything, and he does not get it. He gets arrested less than 24 hours later. Like, gosh. And I loved seeing Hongjun just carrying him to bed. I love the fact that, like, even though Li Jinglong is, I don't know, like, has more of a military background and was perhaps seen as, like, more masculine, I don't know, in some ways, they're both really strong. And Hongjun can just pick up his boyfriend, take him to bed, and tuck him in. That's so precious to me and means so much to me. Li Jinglong really doesn't get a break, because later that day, the Emperor gets scared by seeing an apparition of Wu Zhao appear before him, tell him to repent, and then disappear, which scares him. As, I mean, kind of figures that it would, but in the following scene when Li Jinglong is summoned and interrogated by the Emperor, really reminded how tenuous the power and the security that Department of Exorcism has, and how the Emperor can just take it away like that, and how the Emperor has the power to make or break lives on a complete whim. And also, you see how much both Gao Lishi and Yang Guozhong have been scheming against the department quite comprehensively, and there isn't very much that Li Jinglong can do. And I do find it interesting that the department does mostly work within the system for most of the time. They do tread quite a fine line, and you really see in this scene, you know, how how easy it is for that to break and how easy it is, you know, to get Li Jinglong framed. Huang Yong takes the information to the Department of Exorcism that their chief is under arrest and that they all need to give statements about things, and does a pretty good job at actually talking with them and counseling them, especially as without Li Jinglong there, several members of the department are more than ready to burn the entire city to the ground and do not care at all for diplomacy or propriety or for the consequences of acting recklessly in this situation. The group appoints Morgan as a leader, and there is a really funny exchange because they're in the middle of kind of quite a serious situation. Everyone's panicked, but like Chu Yong says like, let's appoint an interim leader first. How about you, you big idiot? You're taller than me, Morgan retorted. So who's the bigger idiot? It's like there's some pretty serious stuff going down, but they are still just idiotic bunch of guys with crazy powers. Morgan does pretty well at giving orders to everyone, and Atai and Longjun that night sneak into the Young estate to see what is going on. And there is a lot going on because they see a Yaguai impersonating another emperor to intimidate this emperor, and then nearly get caught and accused of trying to assassinate the emperor. Luckily, who should be there but Li Guinian, who hides them. And we get some interesting lore on both him and Atai, which again was some really interesting world building. And also that Atai didn't fall asleep when they were trying to find where the other members of the department had gone when they were stuck in the Akasha realm back in book 2. He was tailing Li Guinian because he thought he was suspicious, which is really interesting. And it mentions the originator of the technique they're using, which is Saint Shirin, who I think I looked up and is like an actual historical figure, or the one that I could find was, you know, so that's another tie-in to the world. And like, I'm never sure sometimes where the story and world building that Feitian has done ends and history begins, because I don't know this history very well, but I just thought it was really interesting to have another kind of aspect of that coming in through this unexpected scene. We also get introduced here to the sacred flame of Atar, which is something that Li Guinian has been searching for and goes on to be quite important to the story because An Lushan has it. It's like in his bag, or well, he has it. And the Department of Exorcists are trying to get it off him because it's giving him power, and also it doesn't like belong to him. And it is one of the artifacts that was stolen? Li Guinian says that the flame is tied closely to the heavenly demon, which is interesting. And I'm very interested to see in what way. Is that why An Lushan wanted to have it? Because he wants to become the heavenly demon? And the flame is important to that? I don't know, and I don't think it's fully talked about within this volume. Might be something that comes up more in the next volume, we'll have to see. While Atai and Li Guinian talking about all of this, Li Jinglong and Longjun are meeting up again and arguing. Longjun is struggling again with the way that he is really kept in the dark by Li Jinglong and the other exorcists on stuff, and I really get that. I think as the stakes are becoming higher, it is becoming more difficult for him to continue to not have information. The complexity of that issue in the way that Longjun also doesn't want to tell Li Jinglong stuff. Like, he fully does not want to tell him about their memories that they have of their childhood together. And also in the fact that when Li Jinglong does try and involve Longjun in decision-making processes later in the volume, when they are working out how to approach the garden in which there are the flower yao in Luoyang, Longjun is like, why are you telling me this? And Li Jinglong is like, I'm trying to involve you because you're always upset that I don't involve you in this stuff. Which is really funny to me. And I think that time in Luoyang and the way they talked about things there did in some ways heal Longjun's feelings around not being involved in things. I'm interested to see how that continues to play out in later books as things get more intense, Longjun gets older and more experienced, etc, etc. Then Yang Guozhong shows up, or should I say Xie Yu shows up, and there is quite a big showdown between Li Jinglong and Xie Yu as they are both trying to suss each other out, and you see Li Jinglong going full kind of strategist and sort of almost manipulation mode, which is very entertaining to see. This is the first scene where we've seen Xie Yu as Xie Yu, when he is not pretending to be a normal mortal within the court. And part of this scene focuses around Longjun and Xie Yu's and Li Jinglong's past, and throws a lot of things into question in the fact that Xie Yu says that he was friends with Kong Xuan, which is unsettling, confusing, and, you know, at this point could very well be a lie, for all we know. And also in the fact that he says that he isn't the reason that his Longjun's parents have to keep moving. And he also mentions Li Jinglong with reference to the past, which really throws Li Jinglong, because as far as he's concerned, he has never met Longjun before that rainy night in Chang'an last year. Xie Yu talks about what he wants from them and the deal that he wants to make, and there's quite a back and forth between him and Jinglong about it. But in the end, Li Jinglong does agree to the deal of taking down An Lushan. And I was just reading back over it, and there's a point where Xie Yu says that Li Jinglong's price is too high, and I'm like, what price? He just stared at him. It's like, what price was that? I don't know whether I'm supposed to understand the silent understanding that passed between them in that second, or whether I'm not, but I don't. Xie Yu takes Longjun somewhere and talks with him privately. And I feel like you really get to see how Longjun has grown in the way that he sidesteps Xie Yu and talks with him without in any way getting really drawn into the interaction too much, because Xie Yu is quite manipulative and is clearly trying to throw him off, and, you know, is an ancient Yao, and again, you know, has a very different idea of morality to the Exorcists and to Longjun. Also, does Xie Yu count as an uncle? Is he an uncle? Do we have another toxic uncle for Longjun to deal with? It's still not quite rivaling Jinling's amount of uncles, but we're getting there. Then we have another meeting scene. I swear if you read this book and took a shot every time there was a meeting scene, you would not be okay by the end of it. And this is probably, I would say, the most kind of important meeting scene of the book. The other ones so far I've kind of been edging forwards information in various ways and looking at the new information they have, working out what it means, discussing it, and then how that affects their next move. This meeting is the last one we see with the entire group of the book. And it really sets out the directions everyone's going in, and those directions are quite separate, you know. So it was really interesting to see. It was interesting to me that at the end of that meeting, Longjun said that he feels like the fate of the Department of Exorcism might already be sealed, because to me it did really feel like this was the next step, you know, of, in some ways, everyone's kind of going off on their own things, or it's the next step of everyone's stories now, and I'm really interested to see what it will be like when they do all reunite in Chang'an in the next volume, after so much has happened for all of the characters in that time in between, which is comparatively quite a short amount of time. Lu Shu takes Longjun back into his memories, but it was very interesting that Longjun's like, I want to know what happened, and Lu Shu's like, well, memories are as uncertain as the future, which I found very interesting, and the sort of the idea that, you know, all we have right now is the present, and I'm interested to see if that will come up any more in a more concrete sense. And I loved the magic that Lu Shu kind of does to take Longjun into that dreamscape, with like the kind of the clasping of hands and stuff. It feels very powerful, and I love sort of that kind of intuitive bond that Luxu and Hongjun have, and just seeing that grow over the course of this volume has been really lovely. We get to see various scenes of Hongjun and his family in different places and like little snatches, including him visiting a baby Luxu, which is really, really sweet, and also nice to have that context. And reading this bit really reminded me of my own memories, just in that way of looking back at childhood and how different it was. And I feel like Fei-Tian really captures that in the way that he writes the flashback and the way that he writes these children. And then we get to see Li Jinglong and Hongjun meeting for the first time, or the first several times, because Hongjun keeps being like, this isn't the first, this is like, we haven't talked properly. I want to see the next first time we met, because Hongjun is expecting some grand thing, and it's just him getting out of the carriage after a long journey and looking tired and ethereal, and Li Jinglong just a grubby kid who's kind of been neglected, showing up and staring at him for a few seconds, and that's their first interaction. I got really excited when I read the interaction where Li Jinglong is like climbing a tree, because there is a song I've had on my playlist for Legend of Exorcism since I started reading the series, and that song is Trees by the Oh Hellos. I would love to see the Oh Hellos music used more in fandom edits and cosplays, because it's so perfect for it. I've had that song on there for ages for vibes, but when I read this interaction, and when I read this passage, there is stuff about climbing trees and also it's literally scaling walls. There is a lyric in Trees by the Oh Hellos. It's all about childhood and looking back. But there is a lyric which is climbing trees like we did when we were children, scaling walls, the walls that took us years to build. And I'm like, what the heck? That's crazy. And I love that so much. There is nothing more satisfying than putting a song on a playlist for vibes of a story when you're near the beginning of the story, and then getting to a bit in the story which makes you go, damn, this fits even more now in a way that is mildly strange. The dynamic that young Longjun had was so cute and sweet, but also felt so real in their first interaction, just being kind of generally quite chaotic. You ever want to know that I'm really mad right now because my camera died? Nearly died. And it's still only on two bars of charge. I paid way too much for this kit for it to work this badly. Anyway, it was really lovely getting to see their relationship develop through these flashes of scenes that Hongjun and Luxu get to see, and how much that helps Hongjun. There is a real difference in the way that he acts around Li Jinglong before and after he gets to witness these memories on his own terms. Like, he is not being forced back into them like he was last volume, with no warning and getting to see the most traumatic moments. He is choosing on his own terms to go back, and he is doing it with someone who he trusts and who he can help curate the space with. Like, he can ask Luxu, like, hey, can you go back to the first time we met? He can do that. And afterwards, you really see him being a lot more comfortable, being affectionate with Li Jinglong and just being around him in a different way, which made me so happy, because I think the way that Hongjun still had that slight discomfort around Jinglong made me just like slightly uncomfortable, because it was clear that he was still trying to work with that, and you know, for good reason. And Jinglong doesn't know that. He doesn't know everything Hongjun has been through, so it's very difficult for him to know how to react to that. You really get to see both of their childhoods, and the way that Li Jinglong was kind of really neglected by his father and he was kind of just growing up on his own, and the way that Hongjun wasn't really allowed to sort of go out, and there's kind of this real sort of again, contrast between the two of them in the fact that sort of like Hongjun, you know, can't really go anywhere, but he, you know, he has parents who like clearly love him and care about him, even if they don't always see eye to eye, and even if the things his parents are doing to protect him are quite extreme. Whereas Li Jinglong, you know, he can pretty much wander anywhere he wants in the city if he wanted to, probably, but he doesn't have that like a parent who, you know, cares about him in the same way. So it's really interesting, and it made me so happy the way that Longjun's parents really adopted Jinglong, and the way that their relationship really flourished. And, you know, you see Longjun looking after him when he's sick, and, you know, they go to school together and everyone thinks that they are like betrothed to each other and that Longjun is a girl. And then of course you have that very dramatic scene where Longjun's demon powers take over, which is terrifying. Just like that image of like a small child with like that demonic energy around them, and the way he fully disappears, it's crazy. And it was interesting, you know, the people who come in, got Kong Xuan, you've also got Xie Yu, and you see some of that relationship, which Longjun does try and work out what's going on between them, and he doesn't fully know. I was really glad that Longjun's parents did talk to Jinglong about that, and weren't just like, we're gonna wipe your memories. They were like, hey, you know, had a chat about it. But that they do decide to wipe the memory of Longjun, so he doesn't remember any of what happened. Li Jinglong wants to enter Longjun's memories, and it was interesting to me that, of course, he's clocked from what Xie Yu said, that he was in Longjun's memories, but again, he doesn't have context for that. And even after they come out the memories, he still does not have context for that. Longjun does not tell him anything about it, which is pretty big. And honestly, I admire his patience in kind of waiting for that information, but it does make me really worried, because I feel like he's going to have information in a bad situation because of, you know, plot stuff. So we're going to have to see. But it was sweet seeing them in that memory together, and Li Jinglong getting to experience what their childhood was like together just for a little bit. That was really sweet, but also kind of traumatic when Longjun discovers that he is in the memory from the fact that he doesn't call him by his original name. He calls him by his current name, the one that Chongming gave him. And Longjun's like, that's not past you, is it? Like, and I was obviously very distressed by the fact that, you know, Jinglong is there, and in some ways it is a violation of what was a safe space for Longjun, of him going to experience these memories and be with Lu Shu. And, you know, I'm not saying what Lu Shu did was wrong in letting Jinglong into those memories, but I do think that that was really difficult. We get a short scene between Morgan and Lu Shu, which is typically disastrous for the two of them. Morgan has finally worked out, like, he's been kind of trying to do too much with Lu Shu, and that they just need to start off with being friends. And says that to Lu Shu, but just hasn't properly maybe considered Lu Shu's feelings, or I don't know. It doesn't go very well. And I mean, it's the fact that that wasn't Morgan's plan. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't blame Lu Shu for how he reacts to that. I am so excited to see where their story continues to go, because they are a disaster together, proper disaster together. But I love them so much. After waking up from the dream, Longjun just grabs his stuff and leaves Chang'an with Li Jinglong without really talking about it, without really saying goodbye to everyone. Kind of a bit like how he left the Mogao caves, actually, but at least now Li Jinglong is with him. And Li Jinglong also is upset. You know, he's upset that Longjun isn't telling him, isn't talking to him, especially as Longjun is constantly like, tell me stuff. Longjun does start to explain, and Li Jinglong is like, stop, I said I wouldn't ask. And part of me was like, oh, because would Longjun have explained then? Would he have told him? Because I feel like that would have been so much better if they were on the same page. I don't know, but sometimes I feel like Jinglong cuts things off because he thinks it's the best thing to do, when it's better to give things more space. I don't know. Li Jinglong asks Longjun how he's gonna make it up to him, and Longjun asks what he wants, and Li Jinglong says that he wants to go all the way later. Which is interesting. Like, I wasn't sure about the way that that kind of intimacy was seen as like a bargaining tool for an argument within that relationship. But like the way that it was like, I didn't feel like that actually played into the actual scene, which I will get to in a minute. And that kind of sets the stage for the next scene, when they have gotten onto the boat, which I love that this Fei Tian has facts about this boat. It's great. They're now on the boat, and they're now finally together alone. Legion Long is probably so happy to just be on like a boat. It's like nothing can interfere with us on this damn boat. We're not in the department, we're not in Chang'an anymore, there are no other Exorcist members around, not expecting to be attacked. Finally, peace and quiet until the poor guy gets seasick the next morning. But anyway, so now it is time to talk about chapter 97, the scene on the boat, Longjun's kind of first time fully together, which I knew there was going to be smut in this book, and kind of from like the second, like the third book, I've been really intrigued as to how it kind of would be written, how the dynamics would be sort of between them with that, and how the scene was written made me really, really happy. Like, it exceeded my expectations. I feel like writing a scene that's so kind of physically specific to the characters is quite hard. And also just, you know, there were so many different aspects to it and the pacing of it, and I felt like it was really well done. It felt really real to read, and there were moments that were like hot, and there were moments that were really funny and everything in between. You can see from the beginning of the scene like how like Li Jinglong is desperate. Like, it's clear that sort of his sort of affections for Longjun have been sort of quite sort of physical from like before the start of their relationship, and for quite a while they've known each other. And which is very different sort of Longjun, who's a lot less confident with sort of that aspect of their relationship, and this is all very, very new to him. And I loved how that was balanced, and how Li Jinglong did give Longjun space within the scene, and that made me really happy. Like, when Longjun was like, I'm uncomfortable, this is painful, Li Jinglong stopped. And gave him space, and, you know, was willing to like be like, okay, I'm gonna take a different route, do something different tonight. You know, that was so wholesome to me. There were other times when Li Jinglong probably should have like stopped and taken stock when he did not, I will admit. But overall, I felt like the tone of it was so good. It was also so kinky. They are so kinky together, and even though Li Jinglong is a lot more shameless with it, you can see that Longjun is still very much on the same kind of like, he's still equally into it. I also really loved how the sort of physical awkwardness and the fact that neither of them know what they're doing really is portrayed, because I feel like, I don't know, one thing that a lot of media sometimes, like, sex and sexuality is kind of like portrayed as like this kind of like perfect thing, or like is kind of romanticized in a way that just feels unhealthy and doesn't acknowledge the fact that like the very realness of it. And I felt like that was really done here, in the fact that like Li Jinglong needing to explain things to Longjun, and like it's not working, and Li Jinglong not fully knowing how to prepare Longjun for this, and Longjun literally being like, oh, where is it? Is there anywhere else I can put it? And Li Jinglong is like, where else is it going? You tell me. The bit, oh my gosh, the bit when, the bit when they both come and they're just lying there, like, just chilling for like 1 minute before Li Jinglong back at it again. Anyway, and they both say I love you for the first time. And there is a clip of that from the audio drama that I have heard, and I really want to listen to the audio drama, and I don't know if the rest of that scene is censored, probably is, but there is a clip of them both saying I love you to each other. It's the exact quote from the book, and it encapsulates all of the love from that scene so perfectly, and it makes me so happy. This is my Roman Empire. I will die on this hill. Also, the next morning when they wake up, like Longjun is like kind of like ready to keep going. He's like surprised that Li Jinglong isn't like aroused, and is like, what's wrong with you? It's like, oh no, you're sick. I would love to know what that scene would be like if Li Jinglong was not sick. Probably like the scene later in the book with the flippin' poison. The story then switches back to the crew that is still in Chang'an, and them discussing plans for what their move is going to be against An Lushan, and Morgan's very ambitious plan for what they're going to do, which the others are quite hesitant about at first, but in the end they agree to. This is when we get to see a snatch of Morgan's past and hear him talk about it and how kind of tragic it is, which is really interesting. And I was reading back to volume 1 recently, and Mergen mentions his father in quite a positive light. I can't remember what the context was now, but it was just like an offhanded mention, which I find really interesting in contrast with sort of seeing the way that his father's family didn't really accept him, which you do see in the flashback later on when he is with An Lushan. I just want to read this bit. I've forgotten this bit from when Hongjun and Li Jinglong wake up, but it's really sweet. When the tides of passion had receded, he and Li Jinglong had embraced each other, spending slow moments kissing and caressing, and this unexpectedly had made him understand even more profoundly that emotion called love. I love how much the story is just Hongjun discovering stuff about humanity and himself and other people, and how much he loves Li Jinglong. That's amazing. Seeing Hongjun caring for Li Jinglong on their journey was really, really sweet, and it reminds me, as many bits in this book did, that he is a doctor. He is a doctor, and he knows what he is doing. Chongming did teach him about medicine and about how to heal and look after people, and he really uses that. You see that, you know, when he's dealing with Mergen's wounds earlier in the book. You see that when he is looking after Li Jinglong. You see that when he is looking after Wen Bin when they're in Luoyang, which we're about to get to. Fei Tian writes a lot about how different Luoyang is and the culture of it being quite different to Chang'an because of where it is in the country, and I found that really interesting, and it does remind me sort of how kind of different and sort of multicultural Chang'an is in so many ways. When they arrive in Luoyang and they find the Department of Exorcism, I was really glad that Hongjun and Jinglong really talked about things with Mara and with each other. You really see how their perspectives on life and death differ, in that Hongjun is a lot less attached to not sacrificing himself than Jinglong is. He's like, no, you must not sacrifice yourself, please do not do that. And you see that again at the end of this book, where Yuan Kun shows Hongjun the future, and Hongjun presumes that he is dead in the future, which honestly, presuming you're dead just because you see your boyfriend with like a son, like, I feel like that sucks, and I wonder how that will affect his perspective in the next book if he thinks he is going to die. He should talk to Chen Xing about this. Is that the fate for all of? Oh gosh, all of the protagonists in the Exorcist series at some point thinking they are going to die? Probably. Then we switch back to Chang'an as Lu Shu and Mergen get ready to put into place the next stage of the plan, and you kind of get to see like how much work they've put into this plan, of the fact that Lu Shu and Mergen are now working close to An Lushan, and also that, you know, they've had to get the people who would be serving the meal out of the way. You know, they are really ready to put this plan into place. As Lu Shu says, you know, face their fears. And you do have a moment of the two of them interacting together. And you do see Mergen showing some attraction to Lu Shu in some way, but it's very interesting because he seems to catalogue it as a primitive, vulgar desire, which is interesting. I feel like there are various ways you could read into that, and I would say the primary one is Mergen's internalized homophobia from his upbringing and kind of cultural background is very present at several points in the story. And especially I feel like that is challenged by Lu Shu just existing. And Lu Shu really questions Mergen about why he's in Chang'an, what's going on with his past, and Mergen really dodges. I'm really interested to see, possibly in the next volume and in future volumes, more about Mergen's like background and story, because I don't feel like we have gotten that much of it yet, in the same way as we have with some of the other characters. I feel like he plays his cards quite close to his chest, but tries not to act like he is. We switch back to Longjun in Luoyang as Hongjun brings this random guy back to the department and is kind of worried about how Li Jinglong will react to it. And I did find it really interesting that Li Jinglong is not at all phased. And it did kind of make me reflect on how much in Legend of Exorcism the characters don't pass judgment that much on other people. They interact with quite a wide range of people. And there is that sort of overshadowing theme with sort of Yao of like not judging when it comes to like Longjun. You know, there have been a few points when the department has been like, look, like, you know, we're not judging you because you're part Yao. But I feel like that also extends to like characters' sex lives. Like they're not judging Wen Bin for possibly having a sexually transmitted disease. Like in the scene with the galaxy, you know, there isn't any judgment for any of people who are there in whatever capacity. And I do find that really interesting because I feel like that's quite different from a lot of books that I read that have an agenda often of unpicking social expectations, norms and values in a way that goes beyond not judging, but usually kind of looks at more in depth what the expectations are. Whereas in Legend of Exorcism, I find it really interesting that like they just don't judge really. And I think I quite like that in a lot of ways, that the Exorcism department is very much a liminal space. Apart from when Turandot showed up and was like, I'm Atai's fiance, I've been searching him for 3 years, at which point the entire gang fully judged Atai, which I respect them for. Then you have the galaxy, which was a crazy new setting. I found it quite overwhelming to read about, like quite a shift onto another thing going on. But I think also like this volume has, you know, it's got for mature readers on the back for a reason. It's been like more explicit than all the previous volumes, certainly. Straightforward portrayal of what is happening in this, you know, kind of market situation. Felt like a kind of new level of that, and I wasn't expecting it to be as descriptive as it was. I've seen a clip, or rather I've heard a clip of the audio drama for this part, which was absolutely golden, specifically the part when Li Jinglong is trying to dodge people by saying outrageous things, which is, and again, you know, very much different to how he would behave around the rest of the other exorcists, and was absolutely golden. I was not expecting Li Jinglong, you know, you've seen him being completely shameless just with Longjun, but like in this setting I was not anticipating that. The way Longjun just wanders off made me fully panic. Like, he's just both naive and just confident in himself to just wander off, and I'm like, buddy, this is the kind of situation where like my brain is just like survival instincts, stick together, you know, don't talk to people, go in a straight line. Because as you see, Longjun nearly gets himself oh god, into some situations through not I don't know, there was a real lack of clarity of stuff there. Although Longjun's talking to strangers does kind of pay off when he finds Li Bai. I think that was probably for me one of the craziest parts of the story. It's just like, what are you doing here? Referencing a historical figure, a well-known historical poet, is one thing. Then having that said figure show up as a drunk martial artist, oh my gosh, is another. And I'm surprised that Longjun wasn't more traumatized by that entire interaction. I love the illustration. Switching from what is quite a busy and overwhelming environment to what is another overwhelming environment, though for very different reasons, we're switching back again to what I think I would say is probably one of the most viscerally disturbing scenes so far of the of the series, which is the scene with An Lushan and that feast that is going on, because the villains that we've had so far, I think I probably mentioned this earlier in the video, but I don't remember, I quoted it over a month ago. The villains we've had so far have been, you know, their villainy has kind of like extended to like tactical murder, and a thing, and like manipulation, things along that kind of scale, which is very different as a villain to An Lushan's like kind of criminal and villainous activity, which is a lot more centered around torture, sexual crimes, and a whole different kind of thing. And I found it a really difficult scene to watch, partly because of how relevant I think it felt reading about such a powerful man who is outright doing these things, and there is a whole hall of other men who are watching. That is very politically relevant at this point in time, and I found it very difficult to read because of that. I did wonder if, like, Morgan's internalized homophobia, I don't fully understand his knowledge of An Lushan, but I did wonder if his internalized homophobia was any way influenced by An Lushan, in the fact that An Lushan is pretty clearly attracted to men. Is also pretty clearly a pedophile. You do in this scene get to see Lu Shu in action for probably what is one of the first times, which was really cool, and see his anger at what is taking place, and see him just being badass and a really good fighter, which was really cool. Because you are watching people suffer, and you're watching other people bet on that suffering. With the rich and powerful who are running the world right now, that feels very relevant. I was interested that there wasn't much on the emotions of Morgan or Lu Shu during and after that scene. Like, it mostly focuses on the action and what's happening, and I'm sure it will kind of come up later, but I did kind of wish there was more, because it is a viscerally traumatizing scene to go through or read, and I was surprised that there wasn't more kind of, you know, debrief after that. And that might be the influence of just not having Li Jinglong there, you know, but like there is a debrief, but there isn't sort of as much emotional focus, I felt, and I would really like to know more about the emotional weight of what that was like for both of them. And it's possible that will come up more as we learn more of their stories. There is a debrief scene between the Exorcists where they start to talk about next steps and the jewel that is in An Lushan's back, which might be related to the fire that they're looking for and stuff. And I do love that there's just a quote of like, like Ally going, go grab a copy of the Holy Scriptures, let's see how many treasures are lost. Like, I don't know, I love that. And it's kind of a reminder how sort of the kind of presence of like religion and spirituality in this book, which is it's quite heavy in this series in some ways, and I kind of love that. And then you have a really interesting interaction between Chu Yongse and Lu Shu, as Chu Yongse is just like in a bathrobe, like laying out talismans to dry, which I love because it's just like a little kind of slice of life bit. And you get some really interesting lore on the dragon quelling tower, and the fact that Xie Yu killed his adopted father Yi Ming to break out of the demon quelling tower, and that is why Chu Yongse, when Xie Yu showed up on the rooftop after Lu Shu escaped the barracks was like, ask him where he buried this guy. And it really spoke Xie Yu. And it's a really interesting conversation because we haven't really heard much about the Dragon Quelling Tower before. And it also ends with Chiongsa saying, "There's a knot in the wolf's heart that cannot be untangled." And Lu Shu says, "I know, the same goes for you." And I don't know, just that feels like it's very lightly touching on an awful lot for those characters. And it makes me really excited because although over these 4 books we have really got to the Department of Exorcism, still a damn lot we don't know about them. Like, we know a lot about Hongjun's past now, we know a fair amount about Lu Shu's, fair amount about Li Jinglong's, Magen's, Atai's, and Chiongsa's, and Ashina Adavan's. We don't know much about them. Relatively, you know, we've seen in this book how much Mergen has hidden his past from the other exorcists. And I'm just really excited to just, you know, get to know these characters more, because, you know, there's still so much to know. And I'm so excited for the shenanigans that are going to follow, and the angst. Getting to see Hongjun be a shameless fanboy over Li Bai was absolutely priceless. It's like, this man just like, this is a drunk man who just pissed in front of you and you're treating him like God. This is hilarious. And Li Jinglong is clearly utterly stunned by this. Like, he probably knew that his boyfriend was going to fanboy over this random guy, but probably not to this extent. As Hongjun disagrees with the idea of dumping a bucket of water over Li Bai's head to wake him up. And again, it's also a bit of an insight into like Li Jinglong's, you know, party days. I don't know, whenever that happened. They make it to the place they were trying to get to, which I can't remember what it was. And Li Jinglong has a diplomatic discussion and backwards and forwards with Wan Jue about, you know, stuff, which is completely derailed when a bunch of the Flower Yao get really excited that Li Bai is there. Which again was funny. Also just the way Fei Tian just has to stress how beautiful the men that they come across are, is also hilarious to me. You really get to see Mergen's trauma now firstly in a scene which is a flashback that Lu Shu has taken him into, of him sobbing in a cave, grieving, which we don't really get context for, but is very, very sad. And then after he wakes up, there is a conversation he has with An Lushan. And An Lushan asks him why he came, and Mergen's like, "You know very well." And you do get some interesting kind of politics on Mergen's tribe and the relationship between Mergen's tribe and An Lushan. I'm running out of energy, so I'm not going to fully cover this scene, but it's really interesting, and you do really see a lot of Mergen's trauma with his family, and also, you know, getting an implication of what his plans might be, but I'm still not 100% sure. And then the fact that they might have to change tack on what they're doing now, because the flame is shapeless, so it's not going to be as easy to capture as they thought it might be, which isn't great. I think this might be, I'm not sure, but I think this might be the last flashback to this group that we get in this volume, and I'm really intrigued as to what we're going to pick up in the next volume. It's probably going to be very intense, and I'm very interested in what Li Jinglong and Hongjun's reaction is also going to be when they find out what this crazy plan was that they went for. We pick up the next morning with the crew in Loyang, which is slowly getting bigger random crew they're collecting there. And we see Hongjun being a bit of a doctor, which he is trained in. And I feel like it sometimes gets forgotten that this man is a doctor, and trying to work out how to cure the poison that Wen Bin is suffering from, with the answer to which is with another poison. And also the fact that he got strands of hair from Lu Fei to use in his medicine and magic, which is pretty cool. And it does actually cure Wen Bin. Liu Jinglong notices something about the poem that Qingzhong used to seal Hongjun's memories, which is that it's one of Li Bai's poems, which leads him to think that there is some time travel stuff going on, which I didn't think of and I didn't realise, and that fits again with, you know, it's mentioned in this volume that Xie Yu has something to do with messing with time, and you see at the beginning that he is fiddling with an hourglass, which I don't think I mentioned, but that seems damned significant now. Also, Li Jinglong, this feels very much like a D&D leveling up thing to me, I don't know, that Li Jinglong can now go into people's memories. Okay, it's kind of a buff power, and that enables them to know where Yuan Kun is and go off to find him. There are some very funny interactions of Li Jinglong feeling challenged by Hongjun's love for Li Bai, which is so funny. He's so jealous. And then when they get to the garden as well, and Li Jinglong tries to like explain to Hongjun his reasoning for the plan they're about to go with, and then Hongjun just turns around and is like, "Why are you telling me this?" Li Jinglong's like, "'Cause you always say I don't tell you stuff." And I just love that kind of dysfunctionality of them just kind of miscommunicating in that way, because it feels so real of being like, you don't tell me stuff. It's like, okay, I'm telling you this stuff. No, okay, I don't want to know this stuff. Xian Yu, and get to know some of her lore as she assists the chaotic party in getting to where Yuan Kun is. The quote, "They're soaking the divine kun to make medicinal wine," is crazy. You get to see Longjun trying to fight against the goo apes, and nearly getting destroyed by the sheer strength of the wine in the room they are in. Is the divine kun's instructions that enable them all to get out of there pretty okay, except Hongjun kills the queen insect, releasing the venom inside it, and it was the lust one, of course. Which means that Longjun have to spend 3 days together taking care of the poison. But I kind of liked how we got details of that scene, the fact that they're both kind of tired by it, and are like sleeping in between everything, and like, I don't know, that sounds way more chill than most of the time sex pollen comes up in stories. We get to hear Wen Bin and Xian Yu's story, which is really, really sweet, and I don't know if that's kind of set up as a foil in some ways to the main couple, in fact that they are, one of them being Yao and the other human, you know, and like not quite destined to be together, and also the fact that, you know, the Divine Kun fully refers to Hongjun and Li Jinglong as Atalanta and Mahamayuri, you know, fully being like, yeah, no, you're the reincarnations, you have these powers of these guys. They travel back to Chang'an together, and you get some really interesting lore from the Divine Kun on how cause and effect works, and again, relying off some really, really interesting religious and spiritual teachings. He allows Longjun to each ask him 3 questions. And it is very interesting that Li Jinglong says he doesn't want to ask about the future, because if he doesn't, then the events of the future aren't predestined to him. Whereas Hongjun does ask to see the future, and he sees some messed up stuff. He sees a battlefield and Chiyoungsa dying in his arms. Then he sees Li Jinglong with a son who is calling him daddy when he's older. And I think that that Hongjun assumes that he's dead at this point, which makes it even more sad when he then comes back to himself after that, when they are back they've just got back to Chang'an, and he says, "I saw the future, a future I want." Because he knows Li Jinglong's okay. That's really sad. But we do finish on a nice note of Li Jinglong pulled him to his feet. As they walked back to Chang'an, he held Hongjun's hand tightly in his, as if he would never let go. My babies! Oh. And that is the end of the book. I skimmed over some bits in the last bit because I'm getting tired, I'm not gonna lie. But I really love chatting about it, and I have a few predictions on stuff for the next book and thoughts. I'm really excited because it's coming out on Tuesday as I'm filming this, so I'm gonna get to read about it very, very soon. I'm really excited to see what Longjun and Hongjun's reactions are to finding out the plan and how that's going with Morgan and the others. I'm not sure Longjun will be best pleased with their plan, but hopefully now that the two of them are back, they'll be able to provide some support and some more information. Though how they're going to get through the fact that Longjun still has an arrest warrant out for him, not sure about that one. But I am very excited to see how that goes, and also how Langlu's relationship is going to develop, because we're really seeing some more of Morgan's trauma and stuff, and I'm really interested to see how that's going to go with Anne Lushan as well, as being this kind of new villain. Also getting more information on the Dragon Crawling Tower from Chu Yongsa. I think that's going to develop more. I think I've heard stuff more about that developing in the next book. And I'm really interested to see. I feel like the next volume is going to be a real test of quite a few things. Probably a test of Longjun's relationship. In the difference in priorities, we saw that a bit with like Longjun being like, I will destroy the world, save you, and Hongjun being like, I'd rather just die and the world be fine, thanks. So, you know, I feel like that's probably going to be called more into question and stuff. And I think that I'm hoping we'll get more information on Xieyu's timey-wimey powers. But I feel like the next volume might be sort of expanding the world more in the same way that the third volume did, because I think this volume has really been kind of building things up in a way, and that might be a rhythm that kind of continues throughout the books. Judging by the cover, which is leading along crying, not going to be great, but we will see. I'm very, very excited for the angst, the shenanigans, the everything in between, whatever will come. But I hope you've enjoyed watching this video if you've got this far. And I hope that you are experiencing some of the more wholesome and chill part of Legend of Exorcism rather than the existential angst. And thank you for watching. If you want to find me elsewhere, I am on TikTok and on Instagram and on Blue Sky under the same name as here. I post Legend of Exorcism cosplays and stuff on TikTok and stuff. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!